From the BBC World Service, in association with ABC and Akashvani, this is Stumped.
Hello and welcome to Stumped, your intercontinental hit of news, features and debate from the quirky world of cricket. I'm Alison Mitchell, back in London, and I took the long route back from my previous destination, which was Sydney. I was flying out of Melbourne, and so I drove the coastal route from Sydney all the way around that southeast corner of Australia, Narooma, Eden, Lakes Entrance. Very stunning. Highly recommend it.
I'm sorry you didn't get some better weather, Ali. Apparently you got a bit of rain down there.
We
Beautiful
did.
places to visit in the right weather. So, well, what do I say? Welcome to you back home. It's Jim Maxwell here in Sydney, and the cricket season gallops along with big bashings and the Ashes and whatever it comes next as Australia get ready to go to Sri Lanka.
And I'm home in Bangalore, where it's a beautiful time of the year. I'm busy rehabbing as that continues. Of course, plenty of time to read all about the continuing fallout of the BGT loss in India. There's rumors about a rift now between the coach and the senior players. The BCC has woken up to the possibility that the Wags are losing the matches for India. And of course, there's also a lot of pressure for the seniors to play some red ball cricket in India now. So it's all unraveling for now.
The cricket train never stops, does it? But first of all, do boycotts work in cricket? Now, it's a question that we're asking as England and South Africa's men are both under pressure to pull out of their matches against Afghanistan at next month's ICC Champions Trophy. It's due to the Taliban regime's oppression of women, which includes a ban on playing sport. In the UK, nearly 200 politicians have signed a letter calling for England to boycott their game against Afghanistan, whilst South Africa's sports minister says if it was up to him, their game against Afghanistan would not take place. Now, there are echoes here of 2003, when the British government didn't want the England men's team to travel to Zimbabwe for their World Cup group match against the co-hosts because of the ruling regime of Robert Mugabe. They did, however, stop short of ordering a boycott. In the end, the match didn't happen due to death threats that were sent to the England team. Now, Zimbabwe's first black cricketer, Henry Olonga, alongside Andy Flower, did take a stand over Mugabe's presidency by wearing a black armband each in their World Cup game against Namibia. It was to symbolise the death of democracy in the country. And Henry's lived in exile from Zimbabwe ever since and joins us from his home in Adelaide now in Australia. Henry, great to have you on Stumped. Not your first time with us either, I hasten to add. I recall, though, doing a documentary with you back in 2013, 10 years on from that black armband protest, where you relived it for us and its ramifications. Can you take us back to that time now and wearing that armband alongside Andy Flower? What did you hope to achieve from that?
Long story short, I was living in Zimbabwe at a time when Robert Mugabe was doing things that I think in the eyes of the world were pretty poor cricket, if you will. In the sense that there were many human rights abuses and violations that were happening at the time. Many people would remember probably the most publicized was the farm invasions, where Robert Mugabe's regime was forcibly confiscating primarily white-owned farms and under the guise of handing them to millions of landless black people. So in the midst of that and a lot of political turmoil, myself and Andrew Flower decided we wanted our voices heard. We wanted to represent the millions of our countrymen and women and people we felt were being oppressed and didn't have a voice, and so we wore black armbands as symbols of mourning the death of democracy, primarily to bring attention to some of the issues. We felt the world didn't really have a handle on how serious some of the issues in the country were, and we thought that the World Cup of 2003 was the perfect platform to have those voices heard. We knew it was controversial. We knew that we'd have many detractors and many people who disagreed with what we were doing. But we felt that Zimbabwe really needed to have what was going on there in full view of the world. And so the Black Armband protest was an attempt to do that.
And I understand at the time you spoke to the England team who were agonising over whether to play Zimbabwe. Nasser Sain was captain at the time. Do you recall what those conversations were like and the mood around it at that point?
Well, we ended up in a hotel, myself, Andy Flower. I believe it was the Cullinan Hotel in Cape Town. David Morgan, I believe, might have been there, Nasser Hussain, Duncan Fletcher, and a man called David Coulthard from Zimbabwe, who was a politician. And he'd actually helped us formulate the Black Armband protest statement, because he was a lawyer and we felt that he'd have a lot of input. From a legal perspective, we felt it would be watertight and we'd cover our backs on that count. But in that meeting, one of the things that stood out for me was the fact that Nasser felt that they were kind of hung out to dry in a sense, because the politicians were saying one thing: we strongly suggest you do this. The ICC was saying, well, if you do this, we're going to fine you $1 million or £1 million or whatever it was at the time. And in a sense, there was a lot of passing the parcel. And then the England and Wales Cricket Board were also saying, well, we can't make the decision for you, but we highly recommend. So it was very difficult for Nasser and the team, I suspect, because it would have been much easier if the government had just said, we're telling you not to do this. We give you a direct command, but they didn't do that. And that, I think, is what caused a lot of turmoil. And of course, as you mentioned earlier, in the end, it was, I think there was a safety and security argument. And then, of course, when the death threats came along, that was the nail in the coffin of their appearance. And of course, it cost England not to come to Zimbabwe. Of course, they ended up not qualifying for the Super 6 stage because we were level on points, and then we got a draw against Pakistan. And we went through on the basis that they had dropped that game. So England may well have gone through. And so it cost England to take that stance, even though on the back end of it, they didn't really get the accolades that they may well have gotten if they said, we're taking a moral stance against what's happening in Zimbabwe.
I do remember Nasser Hussain suggesting that he would have been happier had it been for reasons other than safety that England had not played that match in 2003. But just onto a more macro question. Should these boycotts, and they're important, as you say, regardless of what they come up with, should they be engineered by the sportspersons themselves? In a team situation, of course, individuals are free to take such decisions, or should they be much more a purview of the governing bodies or governments, indeed?
Oh, that's a really tough one. I think it's very difficult to put all of the weight of and the gravity of such a big decision on the shoulders of the sportsmen. I think, you know, primarily they're there to play sport. That's their chosen career. It's their vocation. They feel that's what they want to do with their lives. And to then ask them to, in a sense, lose money, opportunities, salary, etc., I think is a pretty tough call. So I think it's better if it comes from government. That's their business. That's what they do at a government level. That's the business end of diplomacy and negotiation and trying to bring pressure to bear on nation states that aren't towing the line, if you will, in terms of what the world feels is acceptable behavior. And, you know, I'm not sure if the sporting boycotts of South Africa actually worked or really hurt the people that were misbehaving. But I really do think they felt that isolation on a deeper level, because entwined in sport is this idea of nationhood and dominance. You know, back in the day, you had the Colosseum, you had people fighting on the battlefield. Literally, we still fight on the battlefield in a sense, but we're much more, there's got to be a higher threshold to go to that level. But there's a micro kind of war that happens in sport where a team can represent a nation which feels they've then got a dominance over another country. And so on a wider platform, I suspect it just makes sense that the people who are professional politicians, that's their job, that's what they do. They negotiate, they argue, they cajole, they go on in Parliament, and we've seen it across the benches how they argue. They should take that vociferous attitude into putting pressure on nations like Afghanistan or any other nations that they feel ought to be brought into line. And I think it's just such a big call to place that all on the sportsmen's shoulders. Having said that, you know, in our case, we didn't have any pressure coming from any political factions. It was totally the fact that we felt we were citizens. We felt we wanted to be heard. We tried to get the rest of the team on board. In fact, we didn't. Let me rephrase that. We considered getting everyone in the squad to come on board with some kind of protest or boycott. We were going to pull out of the World Cup initially. And then within a few conversations between Andy and myself, we felt that wasn't probably feasible or realistic, because we couldn't get a quorum. We just wouldn't get everyone on the team to buy in. We felt there were issues with regards to representation. There were 4 players of color, and the rest of the players in the team were Caucasian white people. So we felt it would never look right. And so that's one of the reasons it was just between myself and Andy doing the protest. It's very difficult to get everyone on board. I didn't even know what the rest of the team's political affiliations were. Perhaps some of them agreed with what Robert Mugabe was doing at the time. And so for that reason, we felt trying to get consensus among 14 players was impossible. It was deeply personal, our protest. We took it on the chin. We were willing to pay the price. I'm not sure that you can get 14 players to all agree that ending their careers and potentially going into exile is something that they should all buy into.
Jim Maxwell in Sydney. Henry, nice to hear your voice and your well-reasoned remarks on this issue. Just to bring us up to date, what's your feeling about Afghanistan? Because the ECB have written a very strong letter to the ICC calling the situation in Afghanistan gender apartheid. Should England, South Africa and Australia refuse to play them next month, and will anything change?
You're throwing me in the deep end there, Jim. It's kind of, as Ali said, it's kind of sort of echoes of 2003 in the sense that they are trying to, I guess, not commit when they should. They should basically say, we've given a directive to our players that they're not to play the match against Afghanistan. Now, from my perspective, on a personal level, I've got a couple of daughters, as I mentioned earlier, just before we began, and I know the kind of world I'd love them to grow up in. I'd love them to be able to play sport, and they do. One of my daughters plays basketball and they both play tennis. And that's an opportunity that some young girls will not have in various countries in the world. Not only the opportunity to play sport, but the rampant oppression that happens. Some of them are not offered an opportunity to have an education. Girls are no less valuable or effective or useful in the world as men. It's just a gender, and you have no control over it. I was born as a male, and I had no control over that. And so I think that kind of backwards thinking ought to be challenged. Again, I'm not sure who should make the call, but I think it should be way above the players, way above the players. I think either the ECB should stand up. I don't know what kind of penalties they'll face, because here's the other thing, is the ICC is trying to toe this apolitical line. We don't get involved in politics. And and in fact, in the past, they've threatened or actually suspended any countries where the government has interfered in the running of cricket. I think it sort of recently happened in Sri Lanka a few years ago, perhaps, and it's happened before to Zimbabwe, who were suspended, but I'm not sure if that had that political angle to it. In any case, the ICC are very, very clear about this. They don't want government interference in the running of the local cricket boards. And so, obviously, the suggestion there is there'll be harsh penalties if there are various tour programs in place and teams decide or countries decide they're not going to fulfill them. They are deterrents they've put in place. So it must be hard for them. And the reason I say that is because, like back in the day when myself and Andrew Flower did our protest, they must have known there were some things that were the Zimbabwe Mugabe regime were doing that were egregious and that should be challenged. But in a sense, they exist simply as a sporting governing body, and they want to be apolitical. But I wonder how the president of the ICC feels personally about all these issues. And I suspect if you got him in a dark, quiet room by himself, he'd have very different conversations as to what he has to do in public. So I have a little bit of sympathy for them. But by the same token, if we reflect on the Second World War, when it's all said and done 20, 30 years later, it's no good to say I was just following orders and I had no control of the situation, it was bigger than me, etc. So I'm pleased to see that the ECB, England and Wales Cricket Board, are at least taking a moral stance on this, because it is unpalatable in our modern worlds to have girls being considered second-class citizens.
It's worth probably at this point just dropping in the viewpoint of the UK Culture Secretary, who, in response to all of this, Lisa Nandy, has called boycotts counterproductive. We've had England women's captain Heather Knight talk about it last week as well, and she just believes it's not as simple as having a boycott and then things changing. She says, I'm not entirely sure that's going to be the case. Worth noting as well that Heather Knight and Tammy Beaumont, two England cricketers, met with some of the Afghanistan women cricketers who are in Melbourne just recently, which is really great to see them engaging at that sort of level. Well, I'll add in as well the ICC's position here, because they say when it comes to any boycott or cutting of funding to the men's team, because that's another argument about the fact that Afghanistan as a test playing nation, are not fulfilling the criteria of having test status because they don't have a women's team. They say that the ICC's stance is that the Afghanistan Cricket Board is not in control of government policy, and therefore those male players should not be punished due to the actions of their government. So that's the ICC stance as to why they haven't, to this date, taken any action against the Afghanistan Cricket Board. Henry, Afghanistan women's cricketer Feroza Amiri has spoken recently and said she just simply expected the ICC to do much more for those women who were forced to flee Afghanistan. So there's sort of two sides of this, isn't there? There's what's happening in Afghanistan at the moment. There's the issue of the men's team. And then there's the women who were playing cricket who were forced to flee. And she says the game's governing body's done nothing so far, no outreach, not even from the ICC's working group that was set up after the Taliban took over. And incidentally, I think only one member of that group is still at the ICC because, it's made up of different chairs and they move out of their positions. So it's understood the only contact the players have had from the ICC was a reply from Chief Executive Jeff Allardyce in January 2023. The reply to the original letter the players sent him in the month before, detailing their whereabouts and asking for help. Should the ICC be doing something to help these women, regardless of the politicking around, do they do anything to sort of sanction the men's team? Other countries considering boycotts. Is that one thing that is within cricket's wheelhouse to help those women cricketers who have fled?
Oh, absolutely. You'd think it's the most sensible thing to do. We obviously, and I think, Ali, you were there, you were calling it, weren't you? The pink test in Sydney, and we see the force for good that cricket can play in the world on social issues. And of course, with regards to health in this country, in Australia, where they raised $8.4 million, the McGrath Foundation, which was tremendous to see cricket at the forefront of trying to make a difference in the world. And I can't think of anything more emotive than trying to help vulnerable young women who fled from their country because of a ruling power that has made it illegal for them to ply their trade. And so I think it would be poor form if the ICC didn't step up in some way to try and help them. When I got to England after fleeing, I remember writing a letter to the ICC appealing for help because I didn't know what I wanted to do next in my life. And luckily, I had a lot of support from, obviously, the BBC. They allowed me to do a season of commentary when Zimbabwe were on tour there in 2003. But I also got involved with Channel 4, who were a broadcaster as well. And of course, the Lashings World 11, which was a lovely cricket team that I played for. Lots of Aussies, lots of ex-internationals from around the world. And they did a great job raising money for charity as well. But I got no reply. I got no response from the ICC. I guess I was persona non grata in one sense. I was looked at as a rabble-rouser who brought the game into disrepute, perhaps. I don't know. I don't know what kind of sentiment they had towards me. But I think it would have been nice to have heard from someone, even if they told me to just wind my neck in and move on with my life. But I think in this case, I think it would be very, very wrong for them not to help these young women. We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar sport. And when you've got some young, vulnerable people who are oppressed out of their country and left to fend for themselves in literally exile, here's an opportunity where the ICC should not drop the ball, pardon the pun.
Henry, it's been exceedingly valuable to get your perspective on all of this, considering everything that you did back in 2003. So thank you so much for being with us on Stumped. It's much appreciated.
Thanks for the time, guys. Take care.
That's Henry Olonga, former Zimbabwean cricketer who protested against the Robert Mugabe regime at the 2003 Cricket World Cup. We're just on the note of the Champions Trophy matches and those MPs calling for a boycott. It's interesting to note that England have already played Afghanistan twice in World Cups since the Taliban took over, Australia 3 times in World Cups, and South Africa have played them in the 2023 and 2024 World Cups, and in September last year had a first ever 3-match ODI series. And I think it is a fair question to ask as to where were those political voices then if the concern was so great because they've only just come to the fore right now. We should reflect the ICC standing to close off all of this, because in a statement last week, the ICC have said, we are committed to leveraging our influence constructively to support the Afghanistan Cricket Board in fostering cricket development and ensuring playing opportunities for both men and women in Afghanistan. And they went on to say that the ICC has established an Afghanistan Cricket Task Force chaired by Deputy Chair Imran Khawaja, who will lead the ongoing dialogue on this matter. That's all we've got time for on this week's show. So I'll say thanks to Jim Maxwell, Charu Sharma, and to all of you. We'll join us again next time. Until then, bye-bye.